Okay, I'm gonna cut to the chase here. I'm a bit of a Spider-Man fan. And by a bit, I mean I have like 1 or 2 or 4 Spider-Man suits. But anyway, I'm also a huge video gamer, and I love when these two things combine. And so I have a lot of Spider-Man video games, and I'm a fan of most of them, but lately things haven't been going so hot. Until when you see something out of Insomniac, where they have one trailer for an awesome upcoming Spider-Man game, of which we don't know when the release date will be. But hopefully it'll be soon. In the meantime, I felt like going back and playing some of the old Spider-Man video games, and I'm actually going to start talking about them. And trust me, there's a lot. Now, the first game we're going to talk about is Spider-Man on the PS1. That was a classic. Now, if anyone's a Spider-Man fan and a video gamer like me, they probably played this when I was a kid, and they probably feel the same way. One of our first hurrahs as the web slinger. It had awesome swinging mechanics, punching people, all that kind of cool stuff. Sure, it didn't age all that well. You swing on thin air, and when you fall to the streets, it's in a fog, and you somehow die. But it was fun. Hell, I can still pop it in and have a good time. That's just how great it was. A style reminiscent of the 90s cartoon show, the one and only Stan Lee narrating, and a whole slew of Spider-Man's best villains. This game was a classic, and I will never forget it. Oh, there was a second Spider-Man game on the PS1 that I personally never played, so we're not going to really talk about it. I think it had Electro in it, I think. Anyway. Fast forward a year or two, you got the first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire and the video game that complements it. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about it. It tends to play a lot like the PS1 version of Spider-Man, with movie graphics, slightly better for the PS2 era, and it's also voiced by some of the cast of the movie too, so that's pretty neat. But other than that, there's really not much to remember it by. It was an okay game. It wasn't fantastic. Oh, but its sequel? Oh, that beautiful game. Such a beautiful game. Now, besides Spider-Man 2 the movie being praised to this day, Spider-Man 2 the game was probably one of the best superhero games in a long time before Batman Arkham came around. This has got to be one of the first Spider-Man games where you genuinely felt like Spider-Man. Being able to go from one end to another end of Manhattan was such an incredible feeling. And the swinging mechanic was awesome. You finally got to connect to buildings, and it just felt like you were really swinging along the city. It was so much fun. Now, I won't lie to you folks, I did play this game recently again, and to be honest, the magic wasn't there for me as it once was when I was younger. Maybe it's because I grew up a little bit. Maybe it's because it is a 13-year-old game, so obviously it's not going to age too well. But I really enjoyed it, but I didn't really feel that grand sense of excitement that I first had when I first put in the game. And that happens through age, but I don't know, it just saddened me that I didn't feel like it aged as well as I hoped. Especially since the next game we're talking about, I feel, has Ultimate Spider-Man. This is probably, I gotta say this, my favorite Spider-Man game out of all the ones that came out, and there are a lot. Being the first one in a while not based on the movies, being able to do its own thing and having a story that's so good, it actually ended up being canon in the comic book series of the same name. Even playing it now, it still aged pretty decently, considering it has that cell shading you'd see in Borderlands or the Telltale games. They're not as good, but it still looks pretty decent considering. And the swinging in combat felt more simplified, but the world felt so much more vibrant. Being able to go to 2 boroughs, not just one, was a huge change of pace that I really loved. And I'm sad to say we'll probably never see again. But that wasn't the only shtick of this game. You can not only just play as Spider-Man, but you can play as the big purple baddie himself, Venom. Oh, what a rare paradigm shift, and it's so much fun to jump through buildings and throw cars. You kind of felt like the Hulk, especially considering there was a Hulk game that came out at the same year. But, on top of that, you could eat people. And, I mean, eat people and then throw out their dead carcasses. It's kind of crazy. And also snap their backs in half Bane style. Ooh, man, that's harsh. But man, being able to shift from my favorite superhero to one of my favorite villains, and despite the fact that the storyline is pretty short, like you could probably beat it in an afternoon, it's still an engaging story, and this game's a classic for me. Okay, this is the point where Spider-Man games get a little bit murky for me. The 360 PS3 era video games for Spider-Man didn't really have great history with the character. And unfortunately, starting this icing on the cake is Spider-Man 3. Now, I won't lie to you folks, Spider-Man 3, the video game, was kind of a guilty pleasure for me when I was a kid. I mean, personally, I just thought it was better than the movie, for many reasons. And even now, it's just funny to look at. I mean, just look at the animations. Oh, it's just funny. But, like the movie itself, it didn't hold a candle to its predecessor, and it just fell into obscurity. It's kind of a sad ending, but what are you gonna do? But now let's shift gears to Web of Shadows. I mean, there's also Friend or Foe, but like Spider-Man 2 on the PS1, I never played it, so I don't really care to talk about it. Now, this game was a little murky for me. When it first came out as a kid, I was genuinely upset at it. And replaying it now, there are quite a few things I actually liked about it. First things first, the combat is, to this day, unbeatable. In my opinion, this game had the best combat for Spider-Man. It was really fluid and really cool and stylized. Second, to me, this game had the best swing style since Spider-Man 2. And even the look of Spider-Man himself was pretty neat, something kind of mixed between comic book and realistic. Now, one of the issues I have with the game is maybe I'm crazy, but I swear I heard the developer at one point say they rebuilt New York City from the ground up. And if you put on a magnifying glass, just look a little closely, did they? Did they really? Well, if you look, you can tell it's the exact same damn map from Spider-Man 3. It's the same map with a different texture, but most of the buildings are the same. It's... Really? And I get it, Spider-Man 3 and Web of Shadows didn't really come out too far in between each other, but wow, that's the same map. That's just the same map. Hell, I think the Spider-Man model's the same too. Oh, and speaking of Spider-Man, you guys just noticed how his voice is bad? Like, I'm sorry, dude, but just listen.
Where's Cage and his search party? Huh? The civilian volunteers! Pretty redhead, arm in a cast! You are no help!
Whew, that certainly is something. And for some reason he tries to do this Joe Cool voice every time you choose the bad decision.
You're right. I could use a little more fun in my life.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But even with many of this game's flaws, it was still pretty enjoyable to play. Especially when you were able to switch from the red to the black suit. Which, by the way, is not that original. Spider-Man 3 on the PS2 did the same thing. But whatever, it was still a fun game. It is at this point where you kind of figure out that these Spider-Man video games are going to come out every single year, and to do that, Activision decided to give the rights to a new developer, whose name is Beenox. They did DreamWorks games. Alright, let's just see what they got then. Why not? Well, in any case, a few years later, we got this game called Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, one of the first Spider-Man games where it's not free roam, but linear. Now, when I first heard this, I wasn't too much of a fan on that. In fact, I just thought this was poopy diapers. I mean, come on, give me my New York City. But after accepting the fact that change can be good, I looked into it, and actually the game was not that bad. And on top of that, you got to play 4 different versions of Spider-Man, all voiced by some of my favorite voice actors for Spider-Man. Specifically that dude. I miss that guy. But considering their first roundabout, and the fact that this developer isn't exactly a Rocksteady or Naughty Dog, this wasn't bad. Actually, it was pretty good. Now, their next game, which just came out a year later, I personally didn't play, but I watched. Because the thing is, that's a game I like to view kind of like a movie, because the story is interesting, but the gameplay is exactly the same as Shattered Dimensions, and it all takes place in one big building, which is kind of lame. But my 2 favorite voice actors from the previous game came back, and the dynamic between them is really good. It's one I would recommend to watch more than play, honestly, because when you go into a movie, it's like an hour and a half, it's not really super long, and it's just nice to watch. However, to play, I wouldn't really recommend it. Now, after this, you don't really hear anything for a while until The Amazing Spider-Man comes out. And of course, Activision yells at Beenox to make a video game akin to the movie. Now, the good thing is, the video game takes place after the events of the movie, so they still have some pretty free reign, which is a good thing. And on top of that, free roaming New York City is back, baby! Hell yeah! Oh, and look, it's brand new! Look at that, Shaba. See? They did it. Now, this was another one I blindly enjoyed when it first came out, but when I looked back into it and I replayed it, it didn't, again, have that same spark. First of all, the graphics were not up to par, considering all the video games that came out at that time, let alone today. But that doesn't make or break a game. The thing is, for me, is the fact that the levels are all linear in comparison to this free roam area, which I thought was weird. It felt like they could rarely implement the free roam aspect of the game with the linear aspect. It just felt like 2 different games, and I just wasn't too much of a fan of that. Another thing is, unlike the Maguire games, the cast does not reprise their roles in this video game, so they have to choose different voice actors. And they're not bad. They're no Josh Keaton, but you know, they're no Web of Shadows either. Despite all this, it's another game that's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad at least, so there's that. Then Beenox's and Activision's last hurrah, Amazing Spider-Man 2. Okay, so while the movie felt like a bit of a muddled mess of too many storylines, the video game itself also felt like a mess of multiple storylines. I will say this, the swing mechanic was pretty good, but that's kind of about it. The graphics are insulting for this being the first Spider-Man game for the PS4. The voice acting, except for a couple of people, is worse than ever. Oh man, the only ones I kind of like or can stand are Spider-Man and Kraven. And on top of that, they implement this weird-ass morality mechanic, which just gets on your nerves. Alright, hear me out on here, okay? The game requires you to do the criminal activities. And, you know, sometimes you just want to swing around the city. You know how it is when you play a Spider-Man game. But if you don't do any of the random crimes, the game will actually yell at you and get Secret Service on your ass. And even if you try to do the crimes, sometimes you're not going to be able to do them all because there's going to be a random crime on the other side of the freaking island. And it's just, you're just going to be too stressed out, and then Secret Service will get on your butt anyway. It's just BS! Damn it! Suffice it to say, Activision and Beenox's last hurrah with the character ended with a whimper, and after that, they just let it go. And for a while, you don't see anything for the character. That is until E3 of 2016, and you are blessed with this beautiful image. And I'm ready for this game. You think I'm not ready? Oh, trust me, I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's go. I want it. I want the game. Come on! And even if we haven't had any new information since that trailer, I'm not really too mad about that, because I trust Insomniac. They're a very good company. They know what they're doing. And hopefully we'll have some new information this E3. Fingers crossed. And, that's it. Those are the Spider-Man games, at least as far as I've played, and all we can do now is wait patiently for this beautiful masterpiece to come. And that'll be fine. I can wait patiently. Everything's going to be all peaches and roses here. In the meantime, I'm just going to go on and live my life. So, that's it. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Later.